This is one of my favorite videos to film because I get to finish everything that I'm working on, which I love. And right now that's 3 sweaters, which is like 1, maybe 2 more sweaters than I typically work on at a time. But my spring knitting plans were pretty concrete. I knew exactly what I was going to be making, and now I just need to finish them. Starting with this sweater that is definitely my closest whip to being done. This is the Larch Pullover by Paula Lemme. It's only got a few projects on Ravelry, but it is this yoke sweater with a half fisherman's rib yoke. And this one is knit from the bottom up. And I actually knit the body and the sleeves on my knitting machine. I knit the pieces flat and then I seamed them together. I have a couple videos where I talk about this, so I'll link those below if you want to know more. But right now I am hand knitting the yoke and I'm getting very close, as you can see. I've just finished one of the rib sections, so I'm about to work another decrease round and then the eyelet row. The eyelets are worked so that you're decreasing as you're increasing, so it doesn't actually affect the stitch count. It's just decorative. I'm knitting this out of Rowan Felted Tweed. This is a yarn that I got from somebody on a D-stash, so I think this colorway is discontinued now, but it's the colorway Pickle. It is a really, really good color. It's probably my favorite thing about this sweater, despite the fact that it is a little prickly. So we're gonna see how much I actually enjoy wearing this sweater, but I do like to look at it. At this point, I just need to finish the yoke and the ribbing, and then do a couple of finishing details. So I will need to graft the underarm stitches to the body. And then I also left the hem split like this. And I need to decide if I want to keep the hem split or if I want to seam it up. If I decide to keep it split, I will still need to seam the edges because it's a double hem. But I think I need to try it on first before I decide that. Round yokes are definitely the hardest construction for me to fit correctly with the bust, but I'm liking the way it fits so far. And I think because it does fit a little tighter in the body than maybe I typically wear, I think I will leave the hem split like this, just to give myself a little bit more room. I don't want it to be like squeezing my hips, and I like where this length is hitting me. Here's the way the back is fitting. I probably should have put a little bit more of the yoke stitches on the front than the back when I split for the sleeves. Well, I didn't split for the sleeves. When I connected everything together, I thought about doing that. I've done that before with other round yoke sweaters. It's just an easy way to give my bust a little bit more room and take out some of the positive ease that is in the back. I'm really liking the yoke depth. That's another thing that can be tricky to get right with round yoke sweaters. But right now, I feel like I have a good range of movement in my arms. All right, now I need to get back to the knitting. Okay, actually, I just looked at the pattern and I'm supposed to be knitting the neckband right now. I thought I had one more round of the ribbing, but it makes sense. It was sitting fairly high, and I think it's a good place to put in the neckband for me. The pattern says the yoke should be 18 centimeters. Mine is actually 20 centimeters, so yeah, I should definitely start the ribbing. Okay, I'm gonna put a lifeline in just in case this is a mistake, and I need to adjust the yoke. I have just about reached the length for the neckband. I have 1 centimeter to go if I stick to the pattern, which I think I will. I think this will be a good height. It is folded over, so it'll be half of the height. The pattern just tells you to bind the stitches off and sew it loosely onto the base of the neckband. So I just need to decide how I want to do that. I have decided that I am going to bind off the stitches and sew them down, but I'm using a needle that is 2 sizes larger than what I knit the ribbing with, and I'm only binding off in knit stitches, and I'm hoping that will help keep this nice and stretchy. Okay, this is how it's fitting. The neckline is definitely not too tight, so that method worked. I'll probably use that in the future. And I think it's sitting at a good place. It lays nicely on my shoulder and doesn't come up too high. And I think it looks really nice. Now I need to graft the underarms. I'm definitely not camera ready right now, but I wanted to show you that I finished it. I do want to block it before I try it on and fully show it to you, but all the ends are woven in and I seamed up the sides of the hem. This is the leftovers of ends that I had. There were a lot of ends because I knit the majority of this in pieces and I seamed it up. And also you can't spit splice this yarn because it has viscose in it. So I just had a lot of ends to weave in, but I got it done this morning and now I'm going to block it. This is my finished Larch Pullover, fully blocked. It blocked out really nicely. The sleeves I think hit me at like just the perfect point. They were maybe a tad too short before, and I was hoping that the yarn would relax a little bit, and it did. Same with the body length, which is always a little bit tricky to figure out with a top down or a bottom up sweater. I'm quite happy. I think this is like exactly what I would choose as far as the length of the body. And I did, as I mentioned, leave a split hem, which I think is just a nice little touch. Gives me a little bit more room here as well, so it's not like too tight around my hips. And then I think the yoke turned out really nice. I am just a big fan of this half fisherman's rib. I think it looks really cool. Here is a shot of the back, which always has a little bit more positive ease than the front, but I don't think it's too much. Like it's not uncomfortable. The neck hits me at a good spot. This yarn is like a little scratchy, so it definitely kind of like prickles my neck. But aesthetically, I think the neck ended up in a great spot. It is not too tight at all, and here is how the inside seam looks there. So I really like the double knit collar, especially in a lighter weight yarn. I think it just looks very crisp, very professional. And then here is a look at how the yoke fits with the sleeves. I would say the yoke depth hits me about as I would expect for just a yoke sweater. So it comes down a little bit farther. Like here's my armpit. You can see how that like stretches up the arm. But I think yoke sweaters fitting you with a little bit of a deeper armhole is totally fine. Honestly, I could see myself making this sweater again. This was sort of a test to try out knitting half of the sweater on my machine and half of it hand knit, and it went super well. I mean, this went as well as I could have hoped. So I definitely want to try more of these types of projects out in the future. However, kind of an interesting thing looking back is that this sweater ended up still taking me about as long as most of my sweaters tend to, even though the body was knit in, I think, about 2 days. More time than that if you account for the trial and error, but I think now that I know what I'm doing, I could get the body and the sleeves done in just like a couple of hours, probably. So even though half of this sweater was done very, very quickly, the time span of which I spent working on this was about the same as all my other projects. I think it took me about 2 months. I just fact checked myself. It was like almost to the day 2 months of this being on the needles. And of course that includes a lot of days where I wasn't working on it. So it's not as if I spent the same amount of time working on this sweater as my other projects, but time to completion was still about the same. So that's kind of interesting. I would not have predicted that. I would have said that this would come off the needles faster than all of my other projects. This pattern, I would recommend it, but with a couple of caveats. One, I think the gauge and the yarn weight is a little weird. So the gauge itself is perfectly fine, but I would probably not knit this in a DK weight. I would knit this in a fingering or a sport weight just to better achieve the gauge of the pattern. And then there were a few times in the pattern where it instructs you to do some math to figure out your decrease rate. And I don't love patterns that have you do the math as the knitter. I do end up doing a lot of math on my own as I make modifications, but that's like my choice to do that. She does link to an online knitting calculator that will do the math for you if you plug in your numbers, but who knows how long that knitting calculator will be maintained. I mean, it's not something that the designer has ownership over as far as I'm aware. So I don't love that as a solution. I would rather have a couple extra pages of the pattern for the designer to figure out the math for each size and just list those out. Otherwise, I do really like the pattern. I, of course, decided to knit my fisherman's rib right side out. The pattern has you knitting it wrong side out. I don't think there's like a right or a wrong. Just to be clear, those are just the terms that I'm using to reference different sides of the fabric. And I think if I knit this again, I would actually just knit it to pattern and knit it wrong side out because I like the other side of half fisherman's rib as well. It's just a different look. I desperately need to take this sweater off because it is way too warm, but I am very happy with the way that this fits. And I think this was a really successful sweater. I kind of didn't know how it was going to turn out when I started it, but I think I'm gonna get a lot of wear out of this. And I'm happy to have spent the time that I did on this project and excited to explore some other knitting machine, hand knitting, hybrid projects. Speaking of which, one is upcoming in this vlog. It won't be the next one, but it'll be the one after that. I wanted to introduce my next whip. This is the Umbria Summer top by Cookie the Knitter, and it's originally just a single color, but I have added stripes. And this is where I'm at. I'm actually like pretty far into the body. I do need to decide how long I want to make the body. If you've been around, you've heard me talk about this, but I am knitting this out of Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino. The main color is in Blueberry Ice Cream, and then the stripe contrasting colors are Red Currant and Mole. And I'm really liking the way the stripes are coming out. It looks really cool in this broken rib stitch pattern. This is a raglan cardigan, and I'm making a couple modifications that might not really change the end result too much, but changes the way that I'm knitting it. So to start, there is an integrated button band that you knit while you knit the rest of the cardigan, and I am going to pick up and knit the button band, so I've just not knit those stitches. So you can see here I just have a raw edge on the sides of the cardigan. And then the other thing that I have decided to do is knit the neckband after. So again, this is a pattern where like everything is kind of all knit together in one go, which I know a lot of people like. But I often like to knit my neckband afterwards because it just allows me to make any modifications. And I also tend to like the way that a picked up neckband looks more than one that you just cast on and start knitting. Plus, because I'm knitting the button band after the fact, I want to be able to pick up the button band first and then knit the neckband. So it's mostly because I'm changing the button band, it's a cascading effect. I have to change the way I'm knitting the neckband as well. And the reason I decided to pick up and knit the button band instead of working it integrated is because if you look at the pattern photos and also some of the project photos, this button band tends to be a little bit less structured and it causes gaps. If you've seen like those wavy button bands, that's what I'm talking about. And the reason that it does that is because one, you are knitting with the same gauge as the rest of the sweater or the top. The pattern does say to knit these button band stitches tighter than the rest, but I personally find that difficult to actually maintain. One way you could get around this is by knitting your button band on a smaller needle. So you could use a DPN, knit the button band stitches on your DPN, and then continue knitting the body. And when you get to the other side, work those stitches on your DPN. But this is one, fiddly, and two, creates another issue where you need to then work a short row every now and then to kind of catch up your smaller row gauge with your larger row gauge. Okay, and the other reason why this integrated button band is potentially wavy is that it is vertical rib, not horizontal rib. I think that just provides a lot less structure and can get pulled easier than if you picked up the button band and you knit it rib horizontal, or what I'm going to do, which is a double knit button band. So I will show you that when I get there, of course, but I will just be picking up the stitches on each side and double knitting those button bands. I do need to figure out where my buttonholes are going to go, and I also need to figure out what buttons I'm going to use for this. I haven't decided yet, so I might need to go button shopping here soon. But right now what I need to do is figure out what length I want my body. So let me finish this row that I'm knitting and try this on. Okay, well, the yoke fits me, so that's good. I did add a little bit of depth to the yoke. This is the first time I'm trying it on, so I'm just confirming that, that it fits. Obviously I don't have the button bands yet, so it's gonna be a little too small across the bust. Okay, here is about where it's hitting me. So I probably want like a couple inches added at least. It's currently about 8.5 inches, and I am probably going to knit it to be about 10 to 11 inches. This pattern is a little bit hard to recommend. It's pretty overcomplicated for kind of how simple this is. There's a lot of rows that are just written out row by row instead of kind of giving you the formula and then having you work that out as you go. I kind of hesitate to call out patterns for being like this detailed and supportive because some people, especially beginners, as they're learning how to knit, like this is very helpful for them. And I do get comments from people saying that they really like these very detailed and guiding patterns that walk you through row by row because they're learning and it's helpful to have that. And I can totally empathize with that. I mean, I was the same way when I was learning how to knit. I guess in an ideal world for me, there would be those like beginner patterns that do offer you a lot of information on what you're supposed to be doing. And then most other patterns should be written in a standard way that is understandable to the majority of people. And you can kind of graduate to knitting those patterns once you've knit some beginner patterns. So anyway, I can't really recommend this pattern, and I am changing the way to knit this quite a bit. So am I even following the pattern at this point? Probably not. But I think it's gonna be a really cute top, and I'm very excited about what I'm making. So I will keep working on the body. It's going very fast. I know the pattern tells you to work the Haya Grandma's bind off method, which I've used in the past, and I might try that again. It's been a while since I have done it, or I might look into some other ways to bind off 2x2 rib. I'll decide that once I get there, and then I will meet you back here when it's time to pick up the button band stitches. It's been a few days of working on this. I made a decision on the length, and I did stick to that 11-inch length for the body. And I think it's gonna be good. It's sort of a full length effect on me because I have a short torso. So it's maybe a length that would be cropped on a lot of other people, but for me, it's full length without like going past my hips, which is kind of always what I'm looking for. So here is where the body is at. I also figured out how I wanted to bind off. I tried quite a few different bind offs. Roxanne Richardson has a lot of good tutorials on just different ways to bind off, especially in rib, that offer a little bit of stretch, but they don't flare out. And there's just so many bind offs out there, and I'm kind of always like hunting around for one that I really like. And in the end, I decided on the decrease bind off, and I went up 2 needle sizes. So here is how it looks, kind of if I just hold it without stretching it. So it doesn't flare out. It is not extremely stretchy, but it does stretch enough for the hem of a sweater. So you can see like my ribbing is gonna stretch a lot. So it's not gonna stretch that much, but it is not like too restrictive. Another good bind off that I think works really well for like cotton yarn in particular is the suspended bind off, which is just the regular either knit bind off or the rib bind off, like depending on how you want to do that, but it's just the like regular one where you knit 2 stitches and then you slip the first one over. But Roxanne Richardson has a tutorial on how to do it in what she calls the suspended bind off, which is essentially the same bind off. So it's very simple, but the way that she does it is it ensures that you aren't knitting it too tightly without having to change your needle size, and it's definitely stretchier than the typical knit bind off. The problem I have with that bind off is that it is tighter than the fabric itself, so not only does it not stretch, but it like makes your fabric go in a little bit. So I pretty much avoid that bind off. However, I did try this suspended bind off and I really liked it. It wasn't quite stretchy enough for me in this fabric, but I can definitely see myself using that for other projects. So I just wanted to mention it. I'll link both of those below, but the one that I ended up going with is called the decrease bind off, and that is just where you slip the stitch from your right needle to your left needle, and then you either SSK or you purl 2 together. It's very simple, but it does just give a little bit of extra stretch. And then I also decided to go up 2 needle sizes, as I said, just to help with the give, and I think that was the right call. And I also knit one of the sleeves, and I used the same bind off on the sleeve. So here is how that turned out. I pretty much followed the pattern, but I was mostly paying attention to my striping sequence because I picked my sleeve up here. I had like just finished this stripe, so I knit that in the main color, and then I wanted to do another striping sequence and then another 4 rows of my main color. So I was kind of going to knit that regardless like of how short or long the sleeve ended up being. And I am working on the other sleeve, and this is my last like main color round. So I'm very close to being done with this sleeve. And I think this is a good point to try it on again and show you where it's at. Okay, so I do still have my needles here kind of trying to stab me, but this is what the length ended up being. I think it's a good length, especially once I kind of stretch this, because I'll likely be wearing it closed a lot of the time. So once I do that, I think it is like kind of exactly the length that I tend to prefer my shirts. I am wearing high-waisted shorts right now, and it comes like a little bit past the waistband. And then for the sleeve, I think it's a good length. It works well as sort of a blouse style sleeve, so it's not too short. It's a good circumference, I think, and I really like that bind off. I think it looks really nice. It just matches, or it's very close to the elasticity of the fabric itself, so it doesn't add any flare, but it's also not too tight at all. So here's kind of a wider shot to show you how it's fitting. I think it is kind of like maybe a little less positive ease than I was thinking it would have. I am knitting this at a tighter gauge, but I went up a size to compensate for that. Obviously, I'll have the button band, so that has not been knit yet. So that will add some width, but overall, I am a little bit surprised, I guess, by how kind of tight it ended up being. This is unblocked. I do think it will grow a bit when I block it, but trying it on right now, it is just like a little bit tighter than I want it to be. So we'll just have to see, but overall I really like the way that it is coming along. I think the colors are cool, and I love the way this yarn feels. It is so lightweight. I almost don't feel it, and that is like what I always hope for in a summer garment. So I will just keep working, finish off the sleeve, and then I will need to sit down and math out the button band. Okay, so I have knit the left side of my button band, as you can see here, and then I've also marked out where my buttons are going to go. So I have 5 buttons, and now I need to pick up and knit the right side of my button band. So I'll walk you through what I did to kind of figure out how to knit this one. When you're picking up stitches for a double knit button band, you want to pick up a stitch for every single row. So that makes it pretty straightforward to do. So once you pick up a stitch for every row all the way down, you will make a note of how many stitches you have. When you pick up your stitches, you want to pick them up on the right side, of course. And depending on which side of your cardigan you're working on, you might be starting at either the neck or the bottom of your sweater. So if you're working on the left side of your cardigan, you will be starting up here at the neck, because this is the way that the fabric will face you as you pick up stitches this way. And so what you're going to do is pick up all of your stitches, cut your yarn, then you're going to flip this over to work the wrong side. You'll tubular cast on however many stitches you want your button band width to be. In my case, I went with 11 stitches because I didn't want too thick of a button band. And then once you cast on your stitches, you will flip it back to the right side, and you'll start joining each of these stitches that you picked up with the stitches for your button band. When you knit the right side button band, which is often the side that people put their buttons on, you will kind of do it in reverse. So to pick up your stitches on the right side, you'll have to start down here at the hem. You'll pick up all of your stitches, you'll end at the neck, you'll cut your yarn, and then you'll come back down here to cast on the stitches on the right side and then start working your button band from there. I just thought I would explain that because sometimes in these button band tutorials, while they're very clear and they're very good tutorials, they'll often only show the right side. And if you're working on a sweater like this, where you're going to be knitting the button or the neckband separately, it can be a little bit confusing trying to figure out how you're supposed to work the left side because you can't start in the same spot. Okay, so to figure out the button and buttonhole placement, we're just going to do a little bit of math. So once I pick up my stitches, I'm going to have 152 stitches. And I know that I'm working with 5 buttons. The next thing I want to figure out is how many stitches I want above and below the buttonholes. So for this sweater, there's quite a bit of space up here at the top before the first button. So I just visualized how much space I wanted and then counted how many rows that was. And for me, that was 40 rows. And then down here at the bottom, I wanted a little bit of space. I think the pattern has you put a button closer to the very bottom, but I just wanted a little bit of space there. So again, I just visualized that and counted that out. And I counted 10 rows here. So that's a total of 50 rows that I will not be counting toward my button placement. So I just want to subtract that from my total stitches. So 152 minus 50 is 102. So that is how many stitches I have to work with when figuring out where I want to place my buttons. Then I'll just take 102 and I will divide that by 1 less than the total number of buttons that I want. So I will divide that by 4, and that will give me 25.5 rows. So now I know that I want around 25.5 rows in between each of my buttons, and I know where I'm placing my first button and where I'm placing my last button. The last thing to figure out here is what we're going to do with this partial row, because we can't place a button 25.5 rows. And so what you can do is just add those extra rows to either the top or the bottom, depending on which part you want to add a little bit of space to. So in my case, I decided to add it here at the bottom. I really like the buttonhole technique that I found. I will link the tutorial that I used. It's all one tutorial, so they show you how to pick up and knit the button band as well as knit the buttonholes. I finished the final buttonhole and I'm just working on the very last section. And if you've knit a buttonhole in a double knitted band before, I think this will make sense to you. If not, you'll probably just have to watch the tutorial. But the way that it works is you knit the right side of the buttonhole, and then when you're ready to work the left side, you do a yarn over, and as you're working backwards across the left, you will SSK your last knit stitch with the yarn over, and then when you turn, you'll pick up the like extra bar that's left over, like there's still a bit of a gap. So you'll pick that up with your left needle, knit across the left side. As you're coming back across, you will SSK again the knit stitch with the picked up yarn over stitch, and basically you do that as many times as you need to work up the length of the buttonhole, and then you just work across for your very last row. So it's very easy and there's no ends to weave in. I think it looks nice as well, but I mean, it's going to be covered by a button, so I don't know how much that matters, but if I were to leave it open, it looks very clean. And then when I go to pick up for the neckband, I think my plan will just be picking up 1 stitch per cast on. That might be a little too big, so I'll have to experiment there. I might go down to every like 2 out of 3, but I'm planning on just doing a 2x2 rib neckband to match the rest of the ribbing. I think that will look nice, but I'll have to see how it looks in this yarn, and I'll probably go down 2 needle sizes. Typically I only go down 1 needle size for ribbing, but I feel like this needs to be a little bit more structured, so I might decide to go down 2 needle sizes. I'll let you know. And then I was experimenting with some buttons. So I have these little like matte shell buttons, and these are brown, which I think is the only color out of my very small button collection that actually works with this garment. So this is my only option from Stash, and I think that they look nice. It matches the brown stripe pretty well, I would say. So I think this is what I'll end up going for, and I have knit the buttonhole to fit this size button. But I'm getting so close to being done with this. I think I can get this done pretty quickly if I have just like a few hours to focus on it this weekend. It's a Friday, we're about to head out for our evening plans, and then we do have plans throughout the weekend, but I think I can focus on this for at least an hour. That is the hope, and if so, I bet I can get this either done or very close to done. I'm pausing for a moment because I'm not sold on the 2x2 rib for the neckband. This is something that I changed from the design. The original pattern has you knitting 1x1 ribbing, which matches the button band. So what I'm doing here is I am knitting 2x2 rib that I'm lining up with the rest of the rib of the body, and then for the edging here I've just picked up stitches into my double knit button band, and then I'm slipping every other stitch on the edge to get a fairly neat looking selvage, and I think it's fine. It's just I don't think it's going to be as nice as I wanted. There's something about the fact that the rib lines up with the body that I actually don't like. I kind of want the collar to stand on its own a little bit more, and so I think I'm going to rip this out and actually just knit a double knit collar to match the button band. I could either pick up the stitches exactly the same way that I've done here and knit my collar on top of the button band like I've done for the rib, or I could take out the bind off that I did on my button band and keep those live stitches and then pick up the edge stitches of my collar and have the button band like come up the side of the collar. I've seen it done both ways. I think the second way is more popular. So typically your collar will stop at the button band and your button band will come up the side of the collar. But I think I am going to just keep it the way that I've done it in rib, but change it to double knitting, because especially for a blouse like this, I like the way that it looks. There's something about it that makes it a little bit less of like a cozy cardigan and more of like a delicate blouse. So I think what I'll do is just rip this out, pick up the stitches again, and make this a double knit collar. And I think I'm gonna like that better. I'm going to do this a little bit differently to set up the double knitting. So for every stitch that I pick up, I'm going to yarn over in between each stitch. So I'll show you how that looks. So I'm going to start by picking up half of the number of stitches that I originally had for my button band as I was double knitting. So I had a total of 11 stitches. I'm going to pick up 5 stitches across and then 1 extra stitch for the join here. So I'll start in the very corner to make sure that my neck band comes all the way to the edge. Pick up that stitch, and then I'm just simply going to yarn over as you would normally and pick up my next stitch. So I'm just going into the 2 legs at the top of my bound off double knitting, and then yarn over again, pick up the next stitch, and just continue around, making sure to yarn over as I pick up every stitch. And now that I'm done picking up the double knit button band, I will be picking up a stitch for every cast on stitch. When you get to the final stitch, you will still need to work an increase to go along with that stitch. However, if we do a normal yarn over and then we turn our work, this stitch is not going to be workable. So instead of doing a yarn over for this last stitch, I'm just going to do a backwards loop cast on. So I'm gonna grab the yarn, twist it around my thumb, and then pick up a loop. And that is going to be our final increase. Now I'm going to turn the work because I'm knitting this flat, and we're going to start the repeat for double knitting. That is knit one, slip one purlwise with the yarn in front. So for this very first stitch, I'm going to knit it. And I find that the backwards loop cast on is always difficult to knit into, and it kind of wants to loosen up as you knit it. But luckily we just have the one stitch. And now I'm going to slip one with the yarn in front and knit one, and repeat this all the way across. And then when you get to the end, turn your work and repeat on the other side. So knit one, slip one purlwise with the yarn in front, knit one, slip one purlwise, and I'll just repeat this however long I want my collar to be. I'm not exactly sure how wide I want it, but I'm thinking somewhere in the range of the thickness of my button band. After I finished the double knitting, which was about 12 rows, I would say, and so about 6 of those are the rows that you actually see, I did an Italian bind off, which is just like the tubular bind off, except that you don't need to do any setup rows because you're already working in a tube. And here is how it turned out. This has not been blocked yet, but I think it's really nice. I like the way that the collar transitions into the button band. I'm happy with the width of my collar. It's not quite as wide as my button band, but I just wanted something that wasn't going to be like too chunky, you know, but also wasn't like insubstantial. I don't want this neckline to stretch out. This yarn is 70% cotton, so I was just taking that into account, and I'm quite happy with it. I do still need to weave in all of the ends. There's not as many as there would be if I didn't weave some of them in as I went. In fact, I wove most of them in while I was knitting this, but the ones I was not able to weave in yet, I do still need to weave those in, and then I also need to sew on the buttons, which will not be very difficult since I know exactly where to put those. I am curious how much these pieces fold down like they do in the pattern photos. This one seems to be folding down a little bit easier than this one. I've had this on the hanger for a day or so, and at first the neck really just was like sticking straight up like that. And honestly, I wouldn't really mind if that's the way that it sits on my body when I'm wearing it. But I've sort of like been kind of training the neck to come down like this because I like that. I think that's really cute. It gives a bit of a collar vibe, but with the stripes and with the button band that I added on after the fact, I wasn't sure if the wrong side was going to look good enough to show it off like this, and I still can't decide. So obviously there's like maybe a few tension things here that I'll fix as I weave in my ends, but I think I'm actually okay with the way the stripes look. I'm less okay with the way that you can see the selvage from picking up my button band. The neckband I think looks okay, maybe slightly messier than I was hoping for, but it really is just like the selvage. And so I've been thinking of some ways that I could hide that, but if I'm being honest with myself, I don't think that I'll like the way hiding it looks more than just leaving it exposed. I've thought about hiding it with a ribbon, but I really don't like that idea. I have thought about doing like a crochet chain along the edge, maybe just like here to the first button, but I think that's just gonna draw even more attention to it. And so maybe in the end, just leaving it alone is like what will look the neatest, at least to me. I don't know. I mean, I can always add something onto it after I finish this if for whatever reason I'm not happy with it. So I think I'll just wait to see like how this neckline lays once I'm actually wearing it, once I've blocked it, once the buttons are on it, and make my decision that way. But I do like my mods so far. I like the way the neckband looks. I like the button band. I'm definitely excited to see it with the buttons. So I think that's the next thing that I need to do. First, I needed to choose a thread color, so I dove into my thread stash, and I was debating between these two browns. There's a lighter one and a darker one, and initially I did go with the lighter one because I felt like it was a better color match overall. However, once I started sewing on the button, I quickly realized that it actually wasn't a great match and the darker thread would look better. In general, darker colors disappear more, and so if you're wanting to color match, you should pick the darker one. And I did find that to be the case in this situation, so I went with the darker thread, and I sewed on my buttons using a technique that I learned from Roxanne Richardson, where you create a bit of space between the thread and the button, and that matches the bulk or the thickness of knitwear better. So I'm using a darning needle to create a spacer, and then I'll just remove that when I'm done sewing the button on. I'll link the tutorial, but if you haven't seen it before, you wrap the yarn around the base where you've created that space as sort of a shank. And so you can see that when I button it closed, it sits flat. It sits very nicely. So I like to sew my buttons on this way for all of my knitwear, and I liked the way this looked, so I sewed the rest of the buttons on. It's done, it's all blocked, and I really like how it turned out. I think it's such a cute top. I really like the way the stripes look. I like the way that it fits. It's very comfortable to wear. And as you can see, the collar is just standing upright. It's just laying against my chest. It's not folding over as it is in the modeled photos. And I kind of had a feeling that mine might work itself out like this, in part because I did add some structure with the double knitted neckband, and then also because I ended up with a little bit less positive ease than is shown in the modeled photos. And I was wondering if maybe some of the ease was contributing to the designer's collar like wanting to fold like that. And I'm actually quite happy with the way that mine worked out. I have been wearing this all day. I wore it into the office, and it just wants to stay exactly as you see it, and I'm just gonna let it. I do really like the modifications that I made, and I would make them again. The one thing I would do differently is with the button band. So you can see it ever so slightly pulls in between the buttons, especially like up at the top, mostly where the blouse is like sitting over my bust, which makes sense. But I think one way to counter this would have been to put the buttonhole one stitch closer to the inside of the band. I put it exactly in the middle, and as I have worn it and kind of assessed the way the buttons fit, I think it would lay better if the buttons were just like one stitch towards the inside of the sweater, just to give it a little bit more stability. But that's the only thing. Otherwise, I really like the double knit button band. I like the double knit neckband. I think it all ended up working out really nicely, and I'm very excited to have this one done, to start wearing it. It is very comfortable to wear. There is that little bit of wool, the 30% of wool, and so It is slightly insulating, so maybe not the most comfortable to wear if I'm outside and it's 100 degrees, but definitely comfortable to wear into the office or if I'm, hanging out anywhere inside. It is still quite weather appropriate with the 70% cotton. And I just really like how it turned out. I did block this in like warm to hot water, and there was a little bit of dye in the water, but as far as I can tell, like nothing bled onto itself as far as the top. So there's just a little bit of dye that came out in the water, but otherwise no issues. And that is a wrap on the Umbria Summer top. And that means that I am ready to finally work on my final whip of this video, which is my Viola Tee by Aronia Hecoletto. So this is a colorwork yoke t-shirt that I'm knitting out of this BC Garn Bio Balance. This is another wool cotton blend. This one is 55% wool and 45% cotton. And I have finished the yoke, and I'm just doing the final round before I am ready to split the sleeves and knit the body. I'm going to knit the body on the knitting machine. So what I need to do is figure out my gauge on the machine and try to get as close as I can to my hand knit gauge, because I did hand knit the entire yoke. And I'll probably end up knitting the sleeves and the ribbing by hand. So I'm going to finish the round that I'm on. I ran out of yarn, at least ran out of the skein that I was using. So I do need to skein up some more yarn, finish that round, and get the stitches ready to be split. And then I will knit the body flat. So I'll knit the front flat all the way down, so about half of the stitches, and then I'll do the same for the back, and I'll seam up the sides. One thing I'm going to do though is I'm not going to split the back and the front evenly. I'm gonna add some extra stitches to the front, maybe about 10% or so, to give some extra room for my boobs. So that's the plan. I now need to wind up my yarn and pull up the pattern and figure out how many stitches I have so that I can split everything evenly, and then go over to the knitting machine. I did not have the right amount of stitches, and I did not know that until I got around to the start again. So that means my sleeves are not centered. So I guess I got to take out all of the stitches and the stitches I put on hold, count my stitches, find out how many I actually have. Don't you hate when that happens? I have like 20 extra stitches too. Like, it's not a small amount. So either I miscounted right now, or I miscounted when I was doing the increases of the yoke, which does seem a bit weird given that the increases are integrated into the color work. But right now my bet is on the fact that I messed up the yoke somehow. So now I need to figure out how many stitches I actually have and just like recalculate the numbers. Okay, I have exactly the right amount of stitches for the size one above the size that I thought I was knitting. Maybe I was supposed to skip a row from the chart. Ooh, I think that might be the case. Oh well, I'm just gonna separate everything according to the pattern, one size up, but still make the modification for making the front a little bit roomier. And I think those extra like 30 or so stitches that I have, I think it'll be fine. Okay, this looks right to me. Seems like the sleeves are in the right place. Okay, it's never gonna be exact, but I think that is going to work. This is my loosest tension on the machine, so it's as good as it's gonna get. This was my first time transferring hand knitting to the machine and like knitting top down. And this honestly worked so well. Like in one evening, I have the sweater body. Obviously, I still need to do some work on it. So I will be seaming the sides and then also knitting the rib. And I think I'm just gonna start knitting the ribbing in the round right now, and then I'll go back and seam the sides. I was aiming for about 11 inches total, so maybe like 10 and a half before the ribbing. It's a little hard to measure on the machine because your stitches are in pretty high tension. Even if you take the weights off, it can be difficult to get like a really accurate measurement, which is why it's easier to go off of your gauge. And I could have just measured my gauge swatch and counted how many rows I needed to do, but I kind of just winged it. I ended up like just past 11 inches, closer to like 11 and a half inches for the body. And so I'm not gonna do very much ribbing. I'm gonna keep it fairly short because I don't want to add too much length. But I've noticed on my knitting machine I do tend to like overshoot it a little bit. I really don't think you can tell. You're gonna be able to see it better on camera than in person, and on camera I can definitely see this line here. So that is where my hand knitting stopped and the machine knitting began. However, I think that's pretty good. I am hopeful that that is going to block out. This is a little bit more wool than it is cotton, so we can hope. And as for the rest of the fabric, it really does feel very similar to my hand knitting. Okay, so now I am going to start knitting the ribbing. I've gone down a couple of needle sizes and I'm doing 1x1 ribbing, which is what the pattern calls for. That will match the neck ribbing. I ended up using about 1.5 skeins for the body. So I have about half of one left over, and then I have a full size skein left in my cabinet that I probably won't use. I kind of see this being as much yarn as I need, which means I think I bought 4 skeins originally, so I only needed to buy 3. But it's nice when I have a full size skein left over that I don't need to wind. So hopefully this will get me through. I have not sewn up the sides yet, but I did get started on the ribbing, and actually I finished the ribbing. I'm just working on the bind off right now. So I'm doing a tubular bind off. And when I got to the side, like to connect the sides, I just did a couple of decreases to decrease out what will become the selvage stitches. So this is where I'm at. I'm gonna try it on for you. So it's fitting quite well as far as I can tell. The side seams obviously have not been seamed. At first I was a little concerned that maybe I put too many stitches in the front, especially because you can see it's kind of puckering here. But I think the puckering is going to block out / like stretch out a little bit more once I seam the sides. And comparing the front and the back, I don't think that there's too much ease in the front. I think there's a good amount of ease in the back. There's a good amount of ease in the front. I think I'm happy with the distribution that I went with. So I'm just gonna keep working on the tubular bind off. I don't think it'll take me too much longer. I don't think I've mentioned it in this video, but the short row shaping for this yoke is actually beneath the yoke at the back. So it's like all through here. You do short rows, and that is what raises the back a little bit and therefore brings the front neck down. Once I finish the tubular bind off, I will seam the sides and then pick up and knit the sleeves. There are a few rounds that you knit of just stockinette before you knit the ribbing, and I have decided to just go ahead and hand knit the sleeves. It's finished. I blocked it, I wove in the ends, and it is done. And I am gonna try it on for you, but I wanna do one thing before I do that. I want to hit it with a little bit of steam. I blocked it in pretty cold water, I would say, maybe lukewarm or room temp, because I didn't want the colors to bleed. But I do think it could use a little bit of heat to help relax some of the wrinkles. Okay, I think that helped quite a bit with the wrinkles that I was seeing. There is still a little bit of like bubbling throughout the bottom of the yoke here. It makes me wish that I would have just left off that last increase round, because I just don't think that I needed it for the body, but it's not that noticeable. I think it turned out really cute. This yarn is a little wrinkly, so even though I just steamed it, you can see in the body there are like some vertical wrinkles already, and I think I'm just gonna have to live with that. You can kind of see the amount of positive ease in the body here. I don't think the yoke has as much positive ease, like it feels quite fitted to me. I think it looks pretty fitted, but yeah, the body just has like some extra room here, but I think it has a very striking yoke. So I'm really glad I finally got around to knitting this and finishing it. I had it planned, I think last fall. So I've wanted to make this for a while, and it was a really, really fun color work chart. It kept me very engaged. It felt pretty potato chippy to knit, and I like the three colors. I think it's just a very like well balanced color work yoke. There are a few rounds where you are actively working with three colors. That is not my favorite, but it's definitely worth it for me. I am a product knitter though, 100%, so keep that in mind if you're more of a process knitter. There's only a few rounds with the three colors. Overall, I think this is just a very, very cute little sweater shirt. Because of the wool content, I will probably not be wearing this for another couple of months, but it'll be perfect for fall. It's very comfortable to wear. I don't feel like the yoke is like restrictive whatsoever. So as far as circular yokes, I think it fits quite well. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end. I do have some other finishing my whips videos if you want to check those out, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.